off budget borrowing. So it's been recently in news, article stating that are we behind off budget borrowing, because the off budget borrowing has been going into trillions of dollars. So what is this concept? So what are we going to deal in this video is, first, what is off budget borrowing? What are the keywords which are involved in this borrowing? And then finally, what is a necessity for us to take this off budget borrowing? Why is this borrowing necessary? Okay, so this is about today's video. So what is off budget borrowing? Off budget borrowings are loans that are taken not by the center directly but by another public institution which borrows on the directions of the central government. That is the basic definition of off budget borrowing. So to understand this definition, let's look into a small case for explanation's sake. Now, for example, let's say you know that the government is there, or let's start with a small family. You can't put this factor into a small family, but just for example's sake, let's do it like this. For example, if there is a man has to run a family, so therefore he creates a budget. So what is a budget? Budget is, it tells fundamentally what is the income he gets, he or she, and what is the expenditure which goes out fundamentally. So what is the incoming thing? So it is plus, and what is the outgoing thing, which is minus. This is fundamentally the budget of a particular small family which has to run the show. So if the income and the expenditure are both equal, it's good for a family because there are no debts. So there are no losses, no debts. So this part runs with a small family. Now, on a similar basis, let's assume that same person in a particular month, let's say he has a budget, there is income and there is expenditure. But the problem is the income remains the same for some time. Assume that in a particular month. But what happened is, on that particular month, he had an extra expenditure. Like there is a function which happened, a small function which happened, and therefore he had to spend more than what his income is able to get. For example, let's say he has an income of 10,000, and let's say he has an expenditure, normally it is 10k, and let's say he has an expenditure of 8k, therefore he'll put 2k as savings. Normally, this is what happens. A normal house. Now let's say on that particular month he has an extra function. For the function he has to spend 5k. Let's assume this is the situation. So extra 5k. So his income 10k, his expenditure, his basic expenditure of 8k plus 2k he has to put. That is all done. So what he will do is, he has to get it from an external source. This extra 5k which is required for the function will be coming from an external source. So you go to your friend and ask, give me 5k, I will return you back when I have the money. So this is called borrowing. This is called borrowing. I hope all of you have understood this. So you borrow money, get that particular function done, and slowly what you will do from this 10k income, monthly by monthly, you will start repaying this guy. Like you'll pay 500 first, or 200 first, or 300 first. Whatever 5k you have taken, you'll start pulling it with interest. With interest, you'll pay back that person. Therefore, this is a sudden event which happens, function, but this borrowing will not be included in your daily budget because this happens once in a while. So this is this kind or nature where you don't involve this into your regular budget. That is, such kind of money is borrowed. This is the typical function of borrowing concept. Now let's apply the same theorem for the government. Let's apply the same theorem for the government. So let's say the government is there, and you know the government, when it has to get the money or spend the money, there is a budgetary process. It has to follow the budgetary process. Again, income, which is nothing but your receipts or revenue, and the expenditure which you have to do, the regular expenditure. Now, sometimes what happens is the central government or the state government, they'll introduce special schemes. For example, there is a drought, extreme situation, we don't know. Therefore, the government has to spend extra on a particular thing. For example, Pradhan Mantri Yojana, a new scheme has been brought in for agriculture. So for that, let's say an extra expenditure for a program has to be spent. That means that money which has to be spent for the coming 2-3 years for this program to run, I cannot take it from my budget. I cannot take it from my budget because the budget is already fixed. I have so much income, my revenues through taxes, direct, indirect, loans, interest, all these amounts will come from here. That is the revenue part. The expenditure part is what I have to do as a government. But this special program is an introduction and I have no plan for it. So what I have to do, I have to take it from an external source. This external source usually will be a public sector unit, or for example, you can use NSSF, National Small Savings Fund. From that fund, let's say the government takes the money and uses it for this program. So under the directions of the government, this body will generate this money and give this, let's say for this program, let's say it's taking some 5,000 crores. Now this 5,000 crores is not included in the budgetary process. This 5,000 crores is coming from extra side. So this money is spent there. Later, with the coordination of both central government as well as this, they repay that 5,000 crores. That's a different ballgame. But the whole essence of off-budget borrowing is off-budgeting. That means it is off the main lane. It is like a service road. It is not the main road. It is a service road. It bypasses the regular way and takes off track. It's an off-track borrowing that you do. So borrowing, so what happens is, so what is the advantage of it? What is the advantage of it? You take the money, still you have to pay the money. The advantage here is, usually borrowings are not a part of income. Please try to understand this. Borrowings are not treated as incomes. Revenue is a form of income. Receipt, tax, indirect, all are treated as incomes. But borrowings will not come into the category of incomes because it's a one-time thing and you repay it. It's done. It is not a regular kind of thing which happens. So borrowings are not included into them. So what is the advantage if it is not included? Then the concept of fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit. I hope all of you know what is fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is nothing but the total income that a government gets minus the total expenditure that the government has. This is called fiscal deficit. So deficit, the word deficit, usually what happens is the income usually will be less than the expenditure. Why it is less than expenditure? Because from the income they take loans and again and they use it expenditure for welfare of the public. For example, if roads have to be developed, buildings have to be developed, new projects have to be developed. So if this deficit level is on reasonable terms, then you can say that the state is doing beautiful things for the country. If it is exactly equal, income is equal to expenditure, usually that is not considered to be a great economy. On a lower level, for a family level, income more than the expenditure, fantastic. Income equal to expenditure, good. Income less than the expenditure, not good for a single family structure. But on a country level, income equal to expenditure, not good. It's not great. Income more than the expenditure, that means the state is not doing enough. Income little less than the expenditure, good, because that extra is taken from outside and spending on welfare structures. So a decent fiscal deficit is always a good sign of growth. That is what we have to remember. A decent fiscal deficit. Again, if the gap is more, that will lead into debt. That's a different problem. But a decent fiscal deficit is always considered to be good. So that is the essence of it. So the beauty is the fiscal deficit. Now here the beauty is, though these borrowings are being taken from outside, this borrowing is not included into the fiscal deficit. Though it is a borrowing, though it is like a debt, though it can be involved into expenditure, it cannot be treated as income, it cannot be treated as expenditure. The problem is it will not be included in the fiscal deficit. So the fiscal deficit levels will not change because of these borrowings. That is the advantage number one. So what central government does, it starts taking borrowings like this from outside and starts programs, initiatives and all these things. But this is the concept of borrowing. You borrow it, but it is not included. And therefore, since it is not included, you cannot involve them into the tax structures also. So it cannot involve into the tax structures also because it is not involved into the budget. But the problem here is, the major problem that is being seen is, now when for example, a particular state is there, it wants to borrow. When this state has to borrow, the central government should give permission to the state for these borrowings. So fundamentally, the borrowings will be under the rule and regulations of the central government for the state. So if the state wants a borrowing, it has to take the permission of the union government. Union government, if it says yes, then the borrowing comes. So like that, lot of states in our country have taken borrowings from outside or from other funds. Now the issue here is, what happens is, when all these things works out, the tax part comes. The tax is fundamentally a kind of revenue, as I said. Now the whole tax, usually this income receipts, the tax, it will be all taken from the consolidated fund of India usually. Now what happens is, the tax whatever is there, it will be divided under center as well as state. Usually the problem is, center will take around 59% and this fellow will take 41%. Usually it is like this division of taxes. The problem is, the center is taking lot of loans like this. The interest will be paid by that agencies and tax is not being included. Because tax is not being included, what happens is, this all burden has to be distributed for the states. And since this has to be paid, the tax collections will reduce and more amount of tax will end up with the center than the states. So the allocation of the taxable income lessens for the states in comparison to the center. Why the center is taking? Because it will repay this loan, this extra borrowings. So because it has to pay back that extra borrowings, the state's income through taxes is reducing. Therefore, this off-budget borrowing is leading to something called center versus state issue. Lot of states are unhappy with the center because of this off-budget borrowing. So that is the issue. So this is the concept of off-budget borrowing. Now, regarding to statistics, in year 2021, close to $3 trillion were taken as off-budget borrowing, center and states all together. That has been reduced to 1.7 in 2021-22. It is reducing now. So $1 trillion is like a huge kind of thing which has to be paid back. End of the day, it'll again be a burden for the public as well as the citizens only. So that is a problem. So this off-budget borrowing process is like this. So government spends extra paisa. That extra paisa is not taxable. So therefore what happens is, it has to be paid through these organizations only. It is not included into the fiscal deficit. That is the essence of it. So because of this issue, the tax part is getting reduced for the states. Therefore states have a problem with the center. This is the issue about off-budget borrowing. I hope all of you have understood this. So just a quick glance, important points. I told you this definition, what is over. Next, what are the keywords? Fiscal deficit, total expenditure minus total receipts, including borrowings, excluding borrowings. Borrowings, I told you, not included into the mainstream budget. You know what is revenue, what comes plus. Expenditure minus. Very simple. Next, why do we do such borrowings? Borrowings are used to fulfill the government's expenditure needs. Liability of the loan is formally on the center. The loan is included in the national fiscal deficit. Is not included into the national fiscal deficit. That is a highlight point. This helps the country's fiscal deficit within the acceptable level. Though the borrowing is taking place, since it is not included into the fiscal deficit levels will remain same. But end of the day, the liability of repaying back of the loan will be on the center as well as those organizations who have taken the money and use the money. Therefore, that is a problem. So that's about it.